Yeah.
Welcome back to the Gridiron Expert, continuing our schedule previews of our way too early top 25. And today we're taking a look at the 22nd ranked Boise State Broncos, the kings of the group of five, really ever since 2007, back in the Chris Peterson days. Since then, Boise State has never been the same and certainly has never been viewed the same. They strike fear into all of their opponents within the group of five and within the Mountain West, and strike fear into a lot of Power 5 teams as well. And last year was no exception for the Broncos, as they went 12-2. Only losses were to BYU in the regular season by 3, and then the blowout to Washington in their bowl game, which of course was the Chris Peterson Bowl. Peterson coaching the Huskies, but facing off against his former team, and he was the one that got the last laugh, riding off into the sunset with a dominating win in the Las Vegas Bowl. But Brian Harsin has done a fantastic job with the Broncos. So 12-2 last year, undefeated in the Mountain West, won the Mountain West Championship, and really he just picked up where Chris Peterson left off. Peterson kind of instilled in Boise State that sense of electric offenses, strong quarterback play, high scoring, no one's going to be able to compete with us, and Harsin has done the same. Boise State relies on their offense, and that's what you think of when you think of Boise State. Going into 2020, they will have yet again another electric offense. Hank Bachmeier returns at quarterback, who looked poised for a big year before injuries and illnesses kind of took him down, and Boise State went through a cycle of 3 different quarterbacks. They had their running back in George Halani. He returns. They have a deep wide receiver core. The only flaws that you can find in this Boise State team going into 2020 is right there in the trenches. Offensive line was a cause of concern last year, improved as the season went on, but is still struggling a little bit, has some questions there. And then defensive line loses all 4 starters there, including their star in Curtis Weaver. So the defensive line might be a little rough, offensive line might be a little rough, but as we've seen from Boise State, anything that happens early on, they fix and get better as the year progresses. So once again, Boise State will be contending for yet another New Year's Six bowl game, one they would have made had they not fallen to BYU in last year's regular season. So we take a look at their schedule here. Mountain West Conference, not the most scary, not the most daunting of all the conferences out there. Boise State has dominated that conference for so long now. But one thing that you don't see up here that you have to know a little bit about is that 5 opponents on Boise State's schedule are dealing with brand new head coaches. Something that could benefit Boise State or maybe not. You got Colorado State has a brand new head coach. New Mexico, UNLV, Hawaii, and Florida State right here on September 19th, bringing in Mike Norvell. So 5 brand new head coaches that Boise State will be facing off against. You do wonder how those teams will fare against arguably the best team in the Mountain West and one of the top group of 5 teams out there. So we look at their schedule here. We know the Mountain West isn't that bad. We know it's not that scary and that Boise State takes care of business the majority of the time. So what stretch in here, what games in here are ones that you might put some question marks by, or ones that you might say that's the game where Boise State is going to have their toughest test? Well, I think the biggest stretch for Boise State this season, the difference between maybe going to a New Year's Six bowl game or just going to a mediocre bowl, is right here at the beginning of the season. From the season opener against Georgia Southern to the road game against Marshall, basically the entire month of September. That is the biggest stretch for Boise State football this year. And we'll start here at the top. Georgia Southern. It's at home. We assume Boise State takes care of business. Most people will predict Boise State to win this game. But Georgia Southern, it's a bowl team last year. They run that dangerous triple option. You know, that's not a game that Boise State can afford to overlook, especially with some questions along the defensive line. You know, when you had a powerful run game like that, you need guys that are going to be able to shut that down. Boise State might not have that right off the bat. So there's a chance Georgia Southern could come in and put up some points against the Broncos. Can't afford to overlook them. Tough game in week 1. Then week 2, they go to Air Force. And this is the game that I think a lot of people will have circled as maybe a loss on Boise State's schedule. Because the Falcons went 11-2 last year. Troy Calhoun, unbelievable season. Unbelievable season for Air Force going to their bowl game, defeating Washington State and Mike Leach. 11-2 last year, only lost to Boise State 30-19 in Boise. 11-point loss, not too bad. 30 points by Boise State standards isn't really a whole lot. 19 points ain't too bad either for Air Force. 11-point loss there. Now Boise State has to travel there, and like Georgia Southern, we know Air Force. We know they like to run the ball. Those are military academies, Army, Navy, Air Force. We say it over and over again. So difficult to stop on the ground. And that's back-to-back weeks that Boise is going to face teams that run very similar offenses and are very difficult to stop, even though you know exactly what they're going to do. So road game against Air Force, not one to overlook. And then you've got the big one here, the big game against a Power 5 opponent, Florida State, on September 19th. Last year, Boise State in Tallahassee came back down 18 points to the Seminoles. Many thought that was Willie Taggart. He's finally turned to the corner. They're killing Boise State, which is a big deal because they're good. And then Boise State said, not so fast. 18-point comeback. They won 36-31 in Tallahassee over the Seminoles. Now the Seminoles, with a brand new head coach in just week 3, 2 weeks removed from a season opener against West Virginia and Atlanta, has to travel all the way from Tallahassee, Florida to Boise, Idaho to face the Broncos on the blue turf. It's going to be tough for the Seminoles. I'm not saying for Boise. I'm saying it's going to be tough for Mike Norvell and Florida State. Big-time game, and if Mike Norvell steps in there and turns this Seminoles program around, gives them life on offense, finds some consistency on offense, especially at the quarterback position, who we assume James Blackman will be the starter at this point, maybe this game can be fun to watch. Last year's was, but Boise State is a different breed, especially on their home turf. So a big game here against Florida State that will be a resume booster and certainly something that committees will look at when you're looking for those New Year's Six bowl games and stuff. When the College Football Playoff Committee is ranking their teams, Boise is not going to be the only group of 5 team in there. A win over Florida State, who could potentially win 7 or 8 games depending on how quickly Norvell turns it around, would be a great thing to add to their resume. And then you've got Marshall here on the road last year coming to Boise, only losing 14-7. It's very, very difficult to hold Boise State below 21 points, I would say. And Marshall went in there, couldn't make enough plays. Boise's defense was phenomenal in that game, but on a Friday night, only escaped 14-7. Doc Holliday, very, very good coach. Obviously a great coach in the postseason. Marshall went 8-5 last year, 6-2 within the Conference USA. So maybe after an emotional victory over Florida State, Brian Harson's squad has to travel a long ways out to Marshall, and maybe they struggle, especially if Marshall's defense plays the way they did, like they did in 2019. So these first 4 games, very telling. None of them pushovers. Usually you say, all right, non-conference schedule, not going to be too bad. Conference schedule is where it's going to get tough. For Boise, it's the opposite. Obviously, Air Force is a conference game within the Mountain West. But Florida State, Marshall, Georgia Southern, all are non-conference games, and those are probably going to be some of the toughest tests for Boise State before they jump into conference play, which will probably be mostly a cakewalk for them. So, big games to watch out for the Broncos here, entire month of September. Get into conference play. San Jose State, it's been a pushover for a long time. They did land Nick Starkel, another transfer quarterback, went from Texas A&M to Arkansas to San Jose State, which is ironic considering he was the starter for Arkansas when they lost to San Jose State last year. But not too worried about that for Boise. Get a bye week. Utah State was very inexperienced last year. Now they lose their star quarterback in Jordan Love off to the NFL. Probably another win for Boise. At Hawaii could be your trap game just because they met 2 times last year and Hawaii did hang some points on Boise both times. And now they bring in Todd Graham, former head coach at Arizona State, now coming in to replace Nick Rolovich, who left to go take the job at Washington State, and is basically going to continue the same type of offense that Rolovich had with the Rainbow Warriors. So, especially this late in the season, over midway through the season, Graham's going to have his offense in place, and if Hawaii is still that high scoring, that high tempo, up-tempo, pass-happy, could give Boise a pretty big tough test, especially with being in Hawaii. Even if Hawaii doesn't field a good team, to me, it's always a difficult place to play. Long travel time, you're in a beautiful area, you don't really want to focus on football, you want to focus on the fact that you're in Hawaii. So maybe a trap game there for Boise State. And then, of course, BYU, the only other one on this schedule that could give the Broncos some trouble. Was the only regular season loss for Boise State last year, 28-25. Only regular season loss. But the fact they get to host it at home, I think, will go a long way for Boise. They lost at BYU last year. Now the Cougars are making the return trip. Anything's possible, but I think for most people, the odds would be in Boise's favor. Of course, we're not predicting any of these games. We're just analyzing their schedule. But the Football Power Index has predicted every single game. And early indicators from the Football Power Index have Boise State at 12-0. They have them winning every single game on their schedule. Road game at Air Force, home game against Florida State, Hawaii, BYU, every single one. They have Boise State winning. And sitting at 12-0 would be pretty good enough to me to get into a New Year's Six bowl game. They're a couple of years removed from one. It's been a while since we've seen Boise in that setting. 12-0 would absolutely do the job. Probably more so over a one-loss team from the American Athletic. Strength of schedule, quality of opponents, better in that conference, but it would be pretty hard to overlook Boise's undefeated schedule or undefeated season, especially with some quality wins along the way. Brian Harson's got another great team coming in. Schedule lines up perfectly. It's going to be very interesting to see how Boise State fares in 2020. So guys, thank you so much for watching us here on YouTube at The Gridiron Expert. Make sure to check out everything in the description below. Like, comment, subscribe. Look in the description. We've got exclusive content, news, and offers you do not want to miss. So make sure to sign up for that and check it all out. And once again, as always, thank you for watching, and we will see you next time right here at The Gridiron Expert.